Hi, my goal with this video is to show you a little bit of my process in how I use Phon to make my speech assessments and analysis faster and more accurate. So here I already have open my workspace folder, and I'll be using this workshop project. If you're in class, you can download the workspace project here and open the same thing if you'd like to follow along. Here you can see how I would organize, say, for example, kids on my caseload. So I would have a corpus for maybe a site or a job, and a corpus for every individual on my caseload. And within that corpus, I'm going to have one Phon session for every probe at a given time that I administered and want to analyze. The first thing I'll point out is I have templates. These are a great way to speed up your process if there are probes or other tools you use in that you will transcribe in Phon that you use repeatedly. Having a template for that probe can really help you. So for example, if you use the clusters or the singletons probe, you just fill in with the number of records for the number of words they produce, put the words in, generate the targets that you would like for these, and you save it. Then you just copy that file and work from this every time you're creating a new set of transcriptions so you don't have to start from scratch. And if you really want to speed up the process, you can include the target here in the actual and then just make adjustments to it based on the errors the child makes. So I'm going to show you Max's data. Here we have his speech probe administered before treatment and his probe administered after. So I'll open up his before treatment probe. You can see that I've actually segmented this, so it is linked to, it could be linked to an audio file, but that's not necessary. You can just be copying transcriptions directly into Phon. You don't need the audio file if you've done the transcription somewhere else. Um, and here you see I've got like a relatively large sample, but your sample could be really any length that's appropriate for analysis. All right, so the first thing I might do here is look at his percentage of consonants correct. Pretty useful broad measure. But you'll see because I have pre and post, I can look at them both at the same time. In this case, I will ignore diacritics because I know that the way I transcribed has additional diacritic detail that I don't want to count in my correct accuracy, and whether you do that or not is going to just depend on the way that you transcribed and what it represents. So it'll take a minute here to generate this analysis because it actually does generate quite a bit of data for you. I'm going to go straight to the summary here. And you can see that it's giving us his percentage of consonants correct before treatment at 57% and after treatment at 64%. So you can see pretty clearly the change that happened in PCC. Another really useful thing with this analysis is the IPA patterns, which shows for you all of the different ways that he is producing target sounds. So here, all the places where P is a target, he produces P a lot of times, of course. Sometimes he deletes it. Sometimes he substitutes a T or a vowel, right? But you can see really at a glance all of the different substitutes he's using for different sounds. And that's really, really helpful, including how it differs across the two time points. And lastly, going back to the summary here, I want to show you how you can just take one of these tables. So let's say you want your PCC results here. Click this button to copy the table. I'm going to just paste it into any spreadsheet program, just makes it easier to work with. And I'm going to call this PCC because that's what it actually is. Maybe just call this post and pre. Maybe I want to move these around because I want I want pre to be first and post to be second. I also don't need to know like the average of the two because that's not really relevant here, right? So I'm just going to take my table. Let's say this is a report I'm starting. I can just paste it in here. Look at that. And I've got great tables of data just ready to paste into my report. So there's many other analysis that you can do besides PCC. Another one you might want to check out is a measure of cluster proximity. So this is a really nice analysis for looking at how they're doing with their production of consonant clusters. And in this case, you can choose what types of clusters you want to look at. Let's, for this example, just look at word initial onsets. It's probably best if you're going to do an analysis too. Just rename the report title so that it reflects which of these you selected. And I'm using a beta version, so I'm not sure why it's still showing final clusters here, but let's just pay attention to the onset clusters. And you can see here in this, again, summary table that there were 64 or 66 onset clusters in each probe, and you can see how accurate they were overall and how that changed, increased really from pre to post treatment. And kind of like with the last analysis, you can see again a breakdown of each consonant cluster and what the substitutes were for each. So for PL, like in play, this child is producing PL, um, a lot of the time. Sometimes they're producing PR, sometimes they're omitting the L, and you can see that really clearly at a glance. And this proximity score actually gives you different scores for how much of the cluster is correct, which is nice. So it's not just a 0-1 scoring, it's actually a gradient. And just like with the last one, if I think this is a useful table to include, I can just copy it and paste it into my report. Another really helpful analysis that you can get from Phon is a consistency analysis. This is a pretty unique analysis, and it requires that the child has produced the same word multiple times in the sample. So let's take a look at that one. And for this example, we'll just look at one time point pre. This is useful in determining how consistent the child is in their productions, or for instance, their errors, by looking at their productions of the same word. So you can see here with the word bike at the top here that the child produced it twice, and you can see whether it was either accurate and consistent, inaccurate and consistent, accurate and inconsistent, or inconsistent and inaccurate. And if you scroll further down, you can see the actual word productions and visually identify whether they're producing them the same or differently and how. This is a useful tool for separating out, you know, um, typical regular phonological patterns from other influences like maybe motor programming and planning challenges that you might see with more inconsistent types of errors. So the last one I'll show you here are phonological processes. There's other things you can analyze in Phon too, of course, and in fact, they have custom analysis. So really anything you can think of, you can figure out a way to analyze it in Phon if you'd like to. But we often want to look at the frequency of occurrence of different phonological processes. Some common ones might be um, fronting or stopping. For this example, we'll look at the way this child is producing liquids like L and R as glides or vowels. And once again, we can look at both pre and post. So looking here at this summary, we have the number of targets basically the number of instances of R and L and the number of times that they were produced as a glide or a vowel. And before treatment, the occurrence was almost 20% of the time, and that reduced to about 3% of the time after treatment. And of course, you can scroll down and see the actual examples of each of these occurrences in words. So really, these are great ways to show progress. You can copy this table, put it in your report. You can easily, for example, just in Word or in Excel, really generate like graphs and tables, graphs and charts from these. What's really nice about doing this in Phon is that you can be relatively sure that the way your analysis was conducted at different time points was done the same way. There's less human error in the calculation. You can add any number of different analysis to your report relatively easily. So the last thought I have on this is that we've mostly looked at relational types of analysis, like accuracy type measures. We know that independent measures can also be really, really useful. For that, I recommend using the AutoPat plugin, which is something I show you in a different video.